Hey there, super friends. Jonathan Levy here, author of Become a Super Learner and the founder of Super Learner Academy. And stick around because I have a very special treat for you, an exclusive video with four-time USA memory champion, Nelson Dellis. Now, in this video, Nelson is not only going to share what it takes to become a four-time national memory champion, but he's also going to share with us the various benefits that he has actually seen in his life through training his memory. How does it actually improve his daily life? How often does he use these skills? And more. Make sure to hit the subscribe button and stick around to learn more. Nelson, welcome. What a pleasure to reconnect. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing great, man. How are you?
Really, really good. Hey, I want to thank you for coming on. I know my audience is really excited to learn more about your journey, and I know you've taken a shift into writing books recently, but I wanted to ask you, what does it take to become the four-time reigning champion memory expert in the US? Tell us what that looks like.
Yeah, right. So as a lot of the people who follow your course know, that memory is pretty easy to improve instantly. Getting really good at it takes a bit of commitment and practice every day, and then obviously to be one of the best in the country or the world takes a lot of practice, like any other skill. And dedication. So every day I spent a lot of hours just doing these drills. Typically I'm training the specific events that they have at these championships. So memorizing cards, memorizing numbers, memorizing names and faces, lists of words, poems, stuff like that. And I just do sets of them over and over again, different drills to try and get my images to come faster, to make my memory palaces flow better, things like that.
Amazing. And you mentioned, people who are in our course know that this stuff can be learned very quickly, but what many people don't realize, at least until they step into the course, is that there's no genetic advantage here. You and everyone else competing in the memory games had a normal or even below normal memory before.
Yeah, this is something, I never had this before I started it, and even when I did start, I was like all right at it. Definitely not championship caliber. So that's something I definitely have to work on. And anybody who wins these things, it's the same thing. You never see anybody who just shows up and says, I have an awesome memory, I'm going to win this thing, and then wins the thing. That never happens. It's always someone who's trained a lot, put a lot of hours in, and they never had a good memory before that either.
Right. Now, you mentioned you're spending a lot of hours. I remember at one point you told me up to 8 hours as you're getting into competition mode. How are you keeping your brain at its optimal performance when you do that? Is there any kind of regimen, routine, nutrition that you had to follow to keep your memory at its peak?
So just with the sheer amount of hours, especially when I was training really hard, I don't always do that many hours, but there were times when I did, when I was like really hungry to win. I would just do what I could until I was kind of mentally fatigued, and then I would step away from it for a while, do something else, and then come back to it. So I typically like to focus on one specific event. So I do a session of cards for an hour or two, and then I take a break, do something else, come back, do numbers, stuff like that. That was really helpful because otherwise you get burnt out,
Yeah, absolutely. Now, a lot of times when I talk about in marketing, these are the exact skills being used to win world records, win world championships. I always have to clarify to people, and we even say in the webinar that I often deliver, but it can be used for normal stuff too. So I've always wanted to ask you, I've known you for years, how often do you use these memory techniques in your daily life? I know now you're a new parent, a new dad, so you're functioning on less sleep.
Yeah.
How often do you use your memory techniques, and how has it impacted your daily life?
Okay, look, for the honest answer, when I first started learning about this stuff, for the first, say, 4 or 5 years, I would use it for everything that I did in real life. Nowadays, and this might be play into the fact that I've maybe burnt out a little bit. Like when I train, I spend so many hours doing it that like when it comes to real life stuff, I'm just like, I don't care. I don't mind forgetting and being the guy that has a bad memory for a second, because I spent all my energy in the competition mode. So it's pretty funny in a way because sometimes I forget the most easy things, and I shouldn't, especially being who I am. But it's just because I'm not trying. I'm kind of saving it all for the actual memory competition training.
That's so funny, and I think it's an important point to bring up is that, like, in Hebrew we have a saying which translates to the shoemaker goes barefoot. And it's like sometimes people have this imposter syndrome or this crisis of confidence. But I've talked to a lot of memory champions. I've talked to you, I've talked to Ron White, I've talked to Matthias Ribbing, Mark Channon, and they all say this. They're like, if I'm not actually using the techniques, I still have a normal or bad memory. And it just goes to show, like, we have to remember when we learn a new skill, we actually have to remember it, right? It's like the meditation doesn't work unless you do the meditation.
Right.
And so it's an important point for people, like if you actually want to remember stuff, practicing the techniques won't work unless you apply it to the things you want to memorize.
Yeah. I had, it reminds me, I had a friend who was training to be an Olympic swimmer. He was a very good swimmer. But he was like the slowest, like sluggish, lethargic guy, like outside of the pool. And I remember meeting him, like, how are you this way if you're an Olympic swimmer? And he told me, he's like, look, in the water when I'm doing my thing, I put everything into it and I'm fast as hell, and that's where I am an Olympic swimmer. But why should I go fast in everyday life? This is not what I do. This is me just chilling. So I'm slow in kind of everyday stuff, and then when it comes to the Olympic and competitive stuff, I give it all. So I guess that's kind of where I stand.
I love it. Now, Nelson, your book, Remember It, your second book, came out in September, not so long ago. Tell us about that and why folks should read it. I have my copy here. Tell folks why they should pick up a copy of that and reinforce what they're learning.
Yeah, so I'm really proud of this book. It's really, my first book was very targeted to young infants, kind of a picture book of memory techniques. This one is a full-fledged how-to book with all of my tips and tricks and techniques. And it's my voice, it's me. Like these techniques have been around for thousands of years, and you and I, we preach the same tips, Ron White, same tips, but it's, this comes from me. So if someone likes me and the way I say things, then you got to get this book because it's in my voice. And that's what I really love about it, is I didn't really sacrifice any of myself to make it a certain way. It's pretty raw. I curse in it a little bit. It's just like my mind on paper, and I think that helps make it probably one of the most memorable how-to books for memory techniques out there, in my opinion. And it's super colorful and lots of illustrations, which I think makes it pop out of the crowd of other memory books.
That is awesome, and I want to talk to you about an idea I have to mail out 100 or so copies to some of our top students and fans, but I will chat with you offline about that. Nelson Dellis, always a pleasure, and thank you so much for dropping by our YouTube channel.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, super friends, that is all for this week's video. If you guys would like to learn more about accelerated learning, speed reading, and memory techniques, well then I encourage you to check out a completely free 1-hour webinar that I am putting on. All you have to do to claim your spot is hit the link below. And if you haven't done so already, please take a moment to like, share, comment, and subscribe. See you guys next week.